Hey there, I'm going to talk about the skeleton today. And the skeleton is of obvious importance to the human anatomy because without it we would be piles of mush, moving around on the floor. And so this basic framework of the skeleton and understanding it's very important to life drawing. And one of the things we'll be bringing up today is what we refer to as bony landmarks. And bony landmarks are where you can see, where the skeleton's becoming manifest in different parts of our body. Really helps us to draw, the human body when we understand those. The elbows, the outer part of the elbow, the knees, the wrist bone, the seventh cervical vertebrae, the ankles. There are many bony landmarks. But with Bob here, I put a hat on him because his head's a little messed up. I think he was out late. First, we're going to talk about the skull. Now, the skull is made up of two large masses, and the first one's the cranium, the brain case here, and it's rather egg-shaped. And then you look at how far back it comes from the jawbone here. So the cranium's here, and then down here, the jawbone is the mandible. Understanding these masses is really important. Also, that the nasal bone comes out, and then the rest of our nose is made up of cartilage. And then we have the zygomatic bones here. The zygomatic bones are your cheekbones, which on some folks we see more than others, but they're there. And with the skeleton, you have, you can see there's a zygomatic arch in here. You can actually put your finger in there. Here we have the eye sockets. And then, the teeth kind of come out a little bit here. We don't want to draw them flat. And then the chin bone comes out a little bit as well. But from there, and I forgot one thing, the mastoid process, this bone back here, and you can feel it right behind your ear, the bottom of your cranium there. We're going to move on to the rib cage, sometimes called the thoracic cage. And this rib cage is made up of 12 ribs on either side. And all 12 ribs are attached to the vertebrae in the back. But in the front, they're largely attached to the sternum, to the breastbone here. So none of them are actually attached to the sternum because this plastic area on our skeleton here, this is cartilage. This represents cartilage. So they come over to meet the cartilage meets your breastbone. You got 10 ribs that are more or less attached to the sternum. Some of them, the cartilage fuses here. But the other two, so you have 10 ribs here, your 11th and 12th rib are what we refer to as floating ribs. And you can feel those, in your back. The floating ribs are very sensitive. The back of the back of the rib cage is really interesting the way it's curving here. Then all of a sudden on either side it shifts direction and comes in, which enables us to lie on our back, along with our scapula. But there's a significant change of direction there, and you'll see that in the human form. When you all of a sudden you notice a change of direction with the back. In the middle here we have the sternum. Once again. And down here we have what's called the xiphoid process, which is it's pronounced with an X, xiphoid process. Let's move on to we'll talk about the shoulder girdle here, and we've got the clavicles here, your collarbones, and they are attached to your sternum, right above your first rib here. They're attached to the sternum. And then on the other side, they're attached to your scapula, which are your shoulder blades. So front at the sternum, and then to the side, to the lateral side, is the scapula. So the scapula here, really dynamic bone. There's nothing flat about it at all. You have what's called the acromion process here. This is the acromion process. I always follow that up. This large area here is the acromion process. And this is the crest of the scapula. So you got the crest here, and then you have the acromion process. Ribs can move up and down to the side. They're such an important part of movement of our torso. Let's go to the vertebrae. Okay, your backbone. There's 24 of those. And up top, your bones that make up, your neck largely up here. There's 7 of them. The 7 of your of your cervical vertebrae, the C-bone, cervical vertebrae. And the seventh cervical vertebrae, if you reach back behind, lower part of your neck, you can feel it sticking out there. It comes out further than the other vertebrae here. So there's 24 vertebrae, and we already have 7 with the cervical vertebrae. We have 12 thoracic vertebrae, thoracic pertaining to the rib cage. And so obviously the 12 thoracic vertebrae are attached to the 12 bones of your rib cage. All 12 of them are attached to these 12 bones here. So 7 and 12, that leaves us with 5. And those are the lumbar vertebrae, the L bones, the lumbar vertebrae. They come down to meet your sacrum here. Some archaeologists and biologists and such believe that these were separate bones once that fused together over time. But this is your sacrum here, and it's a big triangular shaped bone. The bottom of it is your tailbone, referred to as the coccyx. The coccyx. And while we're talking about this vertebrae, look at the grace of how it turns in this S shape and then comes back out to your sacrum, comes back in for the coccyx. It's really dynamic and fascinating. There's nothing, basic about any of this. We might as well talk about the pelvis, since we're down here at the bottom of the vertebrae. Now, you have 2 different pelvic bones. You have 2 of them, and the ilium bones. And they're really concave here. And then in the back, they kind of, they curve in another way, So there's a lot of dynamism to them. They curve in here, kind of curve out back here, and that's important when you're drawing the pelvis and you're drawing the butt muscles and such. At the top of the pelvis, we have the iliac crest, and a lot of times we can see that. If somebody is, really, really super thin, we see so many of these bony landmarks. We have the iliac crest here. The pelvic bones are fused together here with cartilage, which is this cartilage here is sometimes referred to as the pubic bone, but it's really a cartilage area where they're fused. Let's go on to the arms. So your arms are made up of 3 bones, and the longest arm bone, which is attached to a fossa here, a fossa is a concave area, this longest bone is the humerus, and it's the top of your shoulder, and then down here, it's either side of the outside of your elbow, either side of the outside of your elbow. And yeah, you get the funny bone there. I don't know if it's called humerus bone because of that, but this is the humerus. It's longer than these lower bones here. So when you get down here, first bone I want to talk about is the ulna. We talked about the outside of either side of your elbow, but with the ulna, you have, some people refer to this as the point of the elbow, but it's not pointed, it's a little rounded. But that area there makes up this, so-called pointy part of your elbow. So the outside of your elbow is the bottom of the humerus, and then the point part is the top of the ulna. The ulna comes down here and makes up your wrist bone. And you see wrist bones all the time. So even if you have a very large model, you're going to see some indication of bony landmarks all the time. If somebody's very, very emaciated, you'll see them even more so. The radius here, we don't really see the top of the radius too much. There's a lot of muscle flesh covering that area, but we don't want to count it out. It comes down to the inside of your wrist here, and when you're drawing the wrist transitioning to the hand, it's really important to understand that this radius exists. It also facilitates our ability to turn our arm. All kinds of magical stuff happens with our body. We'll go to the hand since we're at the bottom of the bone. And these bones up here are what we call carpals. And if anyone's had carpal tunnel syndrome from these bones here. And then you get your tarsals and your metatarsals, your metatarsals, and then the fingers are phalanges, are individually, singularly called a phalanx. We'll move on to the legs. This is the largest bone in your body, this femur bone. Obviously, we have 2 of them, but it's the largest bone in the body. And the head of it up here goes into a fossa of your iliac bone, of your pelvis bone. So it goes right into the fossa, the concave area here. And the outside part of this femur is what we call the great trochanter. And when you're drawing, the human form in the pelvic area, understanding where the top of your iliac crest is and where the top of your femur bone is, your great trochanter, is really important because you're going to get a bony landmark at the top of your hip, and another one, if the weight's on one leg especially, you're going to see where the great trochanter is sticking out. The femur comes down, has these two big heads, or one big head, the condyles they're referred to, the condyles. And this is the patella, which is attached to tendons in here. The patella can move a lot. It's really important for us to be able to bend our legs. So that's your kneecap. The lower leg bones. This big one here is called the tibia. It's your shin bone. And this up here is called the tibial tuberosity. I mean, you don't have to remember all those syllables, but it comes out. It sticks out a little bit. So you can feel on your knee where your patella is, and you can feel here at the top of your shin bone where this tibial tuberosity is. And when you're drawing knees, you want to understand both of those. You want to understand all these bones when you're drawing knees. But getting these two down helps you to, draw those mysterious bumps we see in the knees. So the tibia, the shin bone, is really dynamic and it's angular in some spots. It comes down and makes up at the bottom of it your inner ankle here, your inner ankle. The fibula, and the way I remember those, tibia is the larger bone, fibula is the smaller bone. So I remember little fib for the fibula. The fibula. The top of the fibula here, you have this head, and you can feel it just below your knee on the lateral part of your lower leg. You can feel where this sticks out, and you see it on the human form all the time. It's this head of the fibula here, and it comes down to make the outer ankle, the outside of the ankle. The outer ankle is lower than the inner ankle. The way I remember that is down and out. So the fibula comes down and it's on the outside ankle, down and out. The inside ankle is higher. Moving on to the feet, you get the talus bone here, you get the calcaneus bone here, your heel bone, and then you get your tarsals, your metatarsals, and then this guy's toe. I guess he kicked somebody. Your phalanges, that individually phalanx. And there are many bones that make up the foot, but you really want to remember the tarsals, metatarsals, and the phalanges, calcaneus bone. So that's about as far as I'm going to go. I wish I could ask you if there were any questions, but this is a video, so thanks for your time.